The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return, sponsored by Narconon Ojai.
Hello, and welcome to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. My name is Joni Siegel, and this is episode number 188. And today we have a guest, but first, when a person is addicted to drugs and or alcohol, the myriad of choices of treatments can be overwhelming. Narconon Ojai is a residential facility that addresses the physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of addiction with a proven, evidence-based, step-by-step program designed to free those trapped by addictions. For more information, call 1-866-231-5924. Today we have an interesting interview. At least I think it's going to be very interesting. The gentleman's name is Don Cummins. And a few short years ago, like about 9 years ago, he was homeless and he was addicted to crack. He got himself clean. He had a moment of awakening and he began to reach out for help. And that's really the first step for anyone who's addicted to drugs or alcohol. So he reached out and his life began to do a complete 180. He's now married, he has a good job, he's written a book, and he's also developed some courses to help those who are suffering from addiction. I can't wait to talk to him. Let's talk to Don Cummins. So Don Cummins, thank you so much for being willing to be on the podcast and tell your story. I will say, I always give a little bit of a bio before I do the interview. And I don't know if I've said this before, but I'm super excited to hear your story because what I know so far, it's a really good story. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Joni, for having me on the show. I'm very glad to be here.
Awesome. Now, I'm a little bit afraid to ask this question because I know that you started at a very young age doing drugs. But tell us how old you were and how you got started, who introduced you to it, and how your story progressed from there.
Sure. I was 10 years old the first time I got high.
And I have to tell you, I have so much trouble with that. I mean, my granddaughter is 7 and I just, okay.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. I look back on it, and for the longest, I didn't think it was a big deal. You know, it seemed very natural to me. And looking back now, with the perspective of being a father nowadays, and it's very frightening to think that I began at that age. When I grew up, I had a great family, and I do have a great family. My father and mother loved me, and I never doubted that. But they went through their own phase when I was young of in the 70s and the early 70s, getting high and doing their thing. And I was exposed to some stuff that I probably shouldn't have been. And I experienced some trauma and witnessed some violent things when I was young. And I found myself around the age of, 9, 10, feeling very uncomfortable in my own skin. And also very curious about what I had witnessed going on for a few years. And I wanted to try it too. And so when I had an opportunity, I stole some drugs from a friend of my parents, and I got high. And there was a group of kids.
What did you take, Don? What was it?
It was pot, weed. I smoked some weed before I brought it to school, and there were a group of kids at Safety Harbor Middle School, where I went to middle school at, who got high around this big oak tree just across the street from the school. And I thought that was my chance to connect and be cool and to bring my own and have something to offer. And I did. And so I was right in with the crowd, and that was the beginning for me. When I got high, I was amazed at how powerful I felt and how I was really liking the way that reality had suddenly changed. And I felt like I had something in common with people. I found my tribe, and that's how it started for me.
It's interesting. Everybody's story of addiction is different, but there are similarities. And it's interesting when people talk about how the culture that they get into with the drugs, there are agreements there, and it's a group, and it becomes sort of a pseudo family. And yeah, it sounds like that happened to you as well.
Definitely. Yes. My parents had, they got clean, they stopped using drugs, a couple years before I picked up. And part of me kind of felt nostalgic with this new group of friends that I had. They were kind of like my parents and my family and the situations I had been around used to be. And I thought it was cool, they all had long hair, and my parents used to have long hair, were hippie-ish. And so it was kind of throwback for me. And I felt really at home and comfortable with my new friends.
Right. Did your parents have any idea what was going on at that young an age?
They did pretty quickly, because for me, I became an immediate train wreck. And I began skipping school almost immediately. I would get high before school, at lunchtime, and then after school with my new friends. And I began skipping school, sneaking out at night. And I got arrested for public intoxication when I was 11 or maybe 12. I was, and started sneaking out at night and meeting my friends and cruising the streets and hanging out with older people. And so they didn't know what to do. They were very scared for me. And so they took me to a program in St. Petersburg called Straight Incorporated when I was 13 years old, and they had me committed there involuntarily. And so that's how bad it got and how quickly it progressed for me.
And what was that like, being in a treatment facility against your will?
Yeah, it was for me, it was traumatic. I knew that I was out of control, and I knew that I kind of deserved it in a way, is the way I looked at it at the time. I felt like I was a horrible son. I thought that I was a bad kid and that I deserved this. But at the same time, my mom, I'd been to two different schools already. I'd been expelled from Safety Harbor Middle and another school as well for possession of drugs. And so when she told me that we're going to a new school, I didn't think anything of it. And when I got there, I was surprised and to learn that I had just been committed to an inpatient drug program. And it was horrible. It was like the worst thing, my stomach sunk, and I felt abandoned, and I wanted to do good. I wanted to turn my life around very badly at that moment. And I tried. I made a good effort at it. But I had a lot of issues aside from addiction, and that were kind of like the rocket fuel of my addiction. I was lost inside. So I started running away from the program, and that's when I began getting in trouble with the law, stealing bicycles to get away or stealing a car to get away. And I would wind up in juvenile hall and different youth programs. And, my parents hoped that after a couple months that I would come home again and I would be not necessarily fixed, but I would be, on the mend, so to speak. And I pretty much never came home again after that. Wow. The rest of my teenage years was spent in juvenile hall and in prison, youthful offender prison. And so it was pretty tragic for me.
What a heartbreak as well for your parents. I can't imagine. It's why we do the podcast, is to hopefully prevent other parents from having to go through not only what your parents went through, but also the ones whose kids die of overdose. It's just scary. And just to comment on something that you said, and this is another thing we've talked about in the podcast many, many times, is drugs are a solution. The drugs are not really the problem. There's something that led to the drug use, as you well know, in your own life. But okay, so how old are you now in this story, and what happened next?
Okay, well, in the where we're at now, I'm 15, and I'm a habitual runaway, and I'm in the state reformatory for boys at Okeechobee Boys School, which is really a youthful offender prison. There's prison gates around it and barbed wire, and if you get over the fence, they chase you with guns and dogs. So it's not a school. And
That's
I
not
escaped.
The one where they found bodies, is it?
It is, yes. There were two of them. One was in northern Florida, and Okeechobee was like the sibling school of that. And yes, they have found there was a lot of abuse there at the time, especially in the 60s and 70s, and it there was a lot of bad stuff happening when I was there as well, you know, and I remember it. And so yeah, horrible situation.
Wow.
So I ran away from there. I didn't want to be there. So
Okay, I think that's okay. I'm just going to
yeah.
say, I think that sounded like from what I've read about that place, it was a good place to run away from. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did. And I wound up getting in more trouble. I stole a car to get away. And by that time I had 32 arrests on my juvenile record. And so the judge, he certified me as an adult, and they sentenced me to 2 years in prison. And so I entered in the Florida State Prison up in Rayford at the age of 16 for my first prison sentence. And so, yeah, that's.
Oh my goodness! Wow, I don't have a comment. I don't know what to say. That's just such a heartbreak. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was. You know, when I look back now at that, and the rest of my prison time as well, I get asked a lot about like, what was prison like? What was it like to be there? And you know, I could, you know, talk about things that I saw or that I experienced, and kind of like movie stuff, you know, things that you see in the movies, violence and confrontations, and you know, all which would be true. But the biggest thing through the lens that I have nowadays is seeing how lost I was, and how badly I wanted to try to impress, and the walls that I put up to prevent people from getting to know who I truly was, because I was afraid, you know, as was everyone else there. Fear was the biggest motivator in my decision making and in my interaction with other people, and how I presented myself, because I wanted to protect myself. I didn't have drugs anymore, and so I had to try to act tough. And I tried to use my skills in playing guitar or whatever to make friends who would, you know, to help me out if I needed it. And, you know, I became very much chameleon-like, whatever the situation was, to get along and to adapt and to survive, you know. And so that just reinforced everything that I had going on already inside. And so, yeah.
So 16 years old, you were in prison.
Yes.
As an adult. I don't understand how that can be okay and legal. I'm just
it's, I don't believe it's okay, but it was legal. And the law, and I don't know what it's like today, but if you get in too much trouble, and they believe that you're of an age that you know, if they decide that you appear to be of an age where you can understand right from wrong well enough, and they believe that you're not capable of being rehabilitated, then, and they did that frequently for kids who got just in trouble one too many times. And you know, I made it through that without any major incidences, but I know of kids, and I that did not, you know, that were violently abused and who committed suicide. And, you know, adult prison is not a place for teenagers. And so there's a reason why it's called adult prison. And so, yeah, it's tragic. And so,
wow. And how long were you there?
2 years. And I got out just shy of 18. And I was going to try to do the right thing. And I promised my family that I would do better. And I got in trouble right away. I started using drugs again. And so I lasted maybe a week or two living at home after all those years. And I wound up going to Colorado to live with some family. And I thought that a change in location would change things, and it didn't. You know, I started using harder drugs, and so that's when I began using cocaine and speed, and I had started using crack yet at that time, but I would go on binges. You know, I would binge use, and I just would. My life became a total wreck, and I decided I needed another change of location. So I went to Los Angeles. I hitchhiked out there, and I brought my guitar, and I was going to be successful in music. So that was my change of plans there for a while.
And how did that go?
It didn't work out as I planned. um, I, I wound up homeless, and I wound up becoming a crackhead, and I wound up shooting drugs, and I got pretty desperate. I wound up dumpster diving, and um, sometimes when I needed needles, I would find needles in the trash in the back of a veterinarian's office. I would do whatever I could to get high. And eventually I met a girl who thought I would be a good fixer upper. And so I got in a relationship, and she used too. And after a year or so, I became very detached from reality, and I became psychotic because of the long binges that I went on. And I don't know where it happened, but somewhere along the line, I began to think that the FBI was watching me, that the CIA was messing with me. And it was always in conjunction with being up 3 or 4 days on drugs. And I started doing robberies, and at some grocery stores and a few other places. And somewhere along the line, I thought that I was involved, in my mind, and it's confusing when I look back on it now, but I thought that I was involved in a government plot. As crazy as that sounds. And I wound up robbing 2 banks and going in there and demanding money. And I got sentenced to federal time for that. And I did 4 years for that.
And what age were you then when you did those 4 years?
That was 87. So I was 19 at that time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, you really approached this drug thing full on.
I did. I went all in, and I sure did.
Okay, so now you're in federal penitentiary for robbing banks.
Yes.
And how long were you there? 4 years, you said?
For almost 4 years. You earn good time off of your sentence, and I did. I earned maybe I think 7 or 8 months, and so I got out. Actually, 3.5, a little over 3.5, and I came home to Tampa Bay, and so I moved in at my parents' house, and it was my I was done with my time, and I swore to myself and my family that I was done. I was not going to use. And in my mind, what that meant to me is that I was not going to use that one drug that kept making me go wild, And but it was okay if I just drank a little bit, or I smoked a little weed or whatever, in my mind. And so, I was very handicapped when I got out, though. I didn't. I wasn't too skilled socially. I didn't have any skills or trade or anything like that. And I decided my best bet was to get into music again. And my brother plays drums. And so we're going to get into a band, and we're going to make it big and start here in Tampa Bay and go national. And, I like to write songs, and I like to sing. And so I thought we would do that. And so we did for a minute, and I wound up joining another band, and they did a lot of cocaine. And, I did it that one time, and 2 weeks later I was shooting it. And within a few months, I had been charged with 6 bank robberies right here in Tampa Bay. And I was sentenced to 22 years as a career criminal at the age of 23, I believe. And so once again, I found myself, in a real serious situation. And I knew I had messed up. I will never forget the weight of how it felt to get a sentence like that, and to be, in my cell, and knowing that I was, I had a very long appointment for the next couple decades. And yeah.
Wow. I mean, you're only 21 and you're getting sentenced to 22 years. That's like your whole lifetime.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. How much time did you end up doing?
I did 15 on that, almost 15. And for me, that time when I went in, you would think that I would learn my lesson, that giving someone a bunch of time like that would really jolt them. And maybe some people it does, but for me, it did in some ways, and it didn't in others. I finally realized that there was something wrong. and I'm 23, and I'm classified as a career criminal. and I have 20 years to do. And I 22 actually. I was sentenced in Manatee County to an additional 2 years. I realized that it's not normal to be my age and to be in prison for bank robbery for the next 20 years, and so I started doing some soul searching. I educated myself, and I began reading a lot of history and religion and psychology, and trying to find out, who I am and what I believe in, and what will work for me, so I don't wind up in a place like this again. And I tried to exercise a lot so that when I got out, I would be okay, and be able to function and be fresh and full of energy. And I envisioned myself getting out and just being successful despite all of that. And so I switched religions a few times, and always learning and seeing things differently. And halfway through, I kind of developed a worldview that I still have. But the thing was, it was all in my. It was intellectual. It wasn't deep within. The journey never made it that 18 inches or whatever to my heart. And so I had just basically signed on to some belief systems. And so when I did get out, things were different. We didn't have much when I was young and when I came up, but my parents had done well during that 15 years, and they had a rental home that they rented out in Safety Harbor, and they said, Don, we want to give you the best possible chance to succeed. I get choked up every time I talk about that, because my parents loved me so much, and they were dismayed by the what had happened to me. As a parent, I get that now, and they just wanted to help me, and so they did. When I went in, there was no internet, and when I came out, there was, and there were cell phones, and just everything had changed. And my parents, they put me up in this house, and my dad got me a cell phone and a laptop, and helped me out with a car, and got me a membership to the Safety Harbor Spa, so I could just go a few blocks and work out. And they set me up, and I had everything going for me, but what I didn't know, and what they didn't know, is the depths that this thing had a grip on me, and I really had never got to the root of it, or dealt with my core issues that were, like a rocket fuel to my addiction. And I felt very alone after I got out. I got a good job, and I started working, but I was very self-conscious of, how different I was than everyone around me. And it was a secret, and I didn't want to let my coworkers know. And dating, that was like, I wanted to get a girlfriend, and I wanted to get married, and I wanted to be a good guy and to be like my dad and my grandfather. And but it was a catch-22, because what if I can't? How do I get over that? And by the way, I've been in prison the past 15 years for bank robbery, but do you still want to date me? And so that's a
tough conversation to have.
It's a very tough conversation to have, and you don't want to wait 6 months to spring it on them. And then right. and then my thought was, if a woman wanted to date me, then what's wrong with her? If you did really get to know me, you're not going to be the mother of my kids, So it was quite a spot to be in, to have to, for me, because I had these, huge walls up anyway. And I tried to overcompensate by thinking I was a tough guy and I was a badass. And so that was hard. And I didn't know how to let people in. And I wound up being isolated and alone and depressed, and I wound up getting high. I would go to work and come home and get high alone in my house and just smoking weed. And I told myself I'll never, smoke crack again. But I did, and I went through the whole thing all over again. I was 42, and having been through everything that I had gone through, I did it again. And I went on a psychotic binge, and I wound up robbing a bank, the same bank that I had robbed 18 years prior, right there in Safety Harbor, Florida. And so I came full circle on that. And I wound up going to a mental health facility. The court sent me to a program in St. Petersburg, an outpatient program, and they began taking me to meetings. And that's when my process of recovery began.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast, or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review. For more information on our sponsor, Narconon Ojai, visit their website at narcononojai.org. That's NARCONONOJAI.org. Or call 1-866-231-5924. That's 1-866-231-5924. Sometimes, the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 1-833-918-0008 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby. I believe I read, one of the things we always look at on this podcast is what was your aha moment or your point of no return where you said, if I don't change, I'm going to die, or something horrible, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison, or I can turn my life around. And I think that it happened in one of these meetings for you, didn't it?
It did. It took a while, and I started going to these meetings, and I started seeing people who I identified with. I always looked at the differences between myself and other people, and I had a mental posture of fear, and I was afraid, as I mentioned, and but for the first time, I started having hope that despite all I had been through, and I had a lot of self-loathing, because I blamed myself and I thought I was a horrible person because I had good parents who loved me and I had all these opportunities, and I just still went back to the same thing over and over again. And I thought that really proved who I was, that I am the move that I make, and obviously my destiny, I thought, was just to crash and burn. And the best case scenario I thought often about myself is that I will serve as an example of what not to do. And I thought that was kind of like my fate, and so anyway, I had all this stuff, and I continued to use every once in a while, not as much because I was in a program and I had some court restrictions on me. But when I did, I did hard, and I would wake up in a crisis unit or homeless in an alleyway. And it was dangerous. I was really close to death on many occasions. And the last time, that I had an incident like that, and I wound up on 34th Street in St. Pete at night, running on the median, thinking that people were chasing me with guns, and almost stumbling into oncoming traffic. And it was busy, and it was, I wound up having the police called on me, and they took me to a PEMS, a crisis unit. And I had a sponsor, and I called him from there, and we talked, and he invited me to go to a recovery workshop. And I went, and the topic was just, the topic of conversation was self-centered fear. And it was, as they described it, as being at the root of a lot of the dysfunction that is not specific to drug addiction, but many things, but in the context of addiction, that it's like the the core issue for many addicts. And I identified with that. And I didn't really understand it at first, but I started thinking about it, and I didn't hear anything at the meeting. But from that point on, I was just in my own head. And I thought about how, I thought that self-centeredness to me had meant like selfishness. But I kind of had an insight, and I saw that it meant that I was really, really just focused on myself, being fearful. And I saw that, and I said, well, why am I so afraid? And then I realized that I was insecure. I realized that I hated myself, and that I thought that I was a horrible person. And I was just struck by that, because I could never admit that to myself. I would tell myself whatever I could about myself to feel better about myself, and I would buy it, but I didn't that day. And I realized that I was not a horrible person. I had the insight that I was just as good as anybody else, and regardless of what I had been through. And I saw that I had greatness within me, and that I get choked up when I remember it, because it was such a pivotal moment. It was like a spiritual experience, and
Yeah.
I saw that I had a right to have an awesome life, and to have connection and to have love in my life, and that I was not a bad person.
Nope.
And so I saw that I was worth fighting for, I like to say. And so the next time, just days later, I went into a homeless shelter, HEP. It's in Clearwater, down by Betty Lane and all of that. And I went there, and a couple days later, they gave me a bus pass, and they handed it to me. And I remember, like it was yesterday. I knew that I could walk a few blocks over and trade that bus pass for crack. And up to that point, every time in my life when, as an addict, I would get $10 or $20 or something I could use to get drugs with. Physically, I would experience like my stomach would go in knots and my knees would get weak, and I would feel like I had to take a shit. That's just how visceral it was with me. And I experienced the same thing, but this time, and I would always just react and go do it. The thought of asking for help or not doing it wouldn't. It was like the moon had come out and I was the wolf man, and I had just turned into something else. But this time, after having had that experience, I had like some space to think about it. And I realized that I don't want to do that. And I didn't know how to. Anyway, I heard my sponsor's voice in my head saying, it's just a feeling. You can get through it. It'll pass. Call me. If you can call me, it might save your life. And so I did, and I got the voicemail. But just by taking that action, that whole feeling left me. And I realized that I can get through some tough feelings, and I can get through some discomfort, and I don't even have to understand the why of it all. I just have to just hold on, reach out for help, and I'll get through that. And so for the first time, I was able to not use when that urge hit me. And it was at that point my life began to do an amazing 180, and I'm so grateful for that experience.
Wow, seriously. And you're right. Everything you say, you're a good person. You're worth it. You deserve to have a great life. And I think that sometimes when people are addicted, they lose track of that. And, it's an editorial comment, parents, when their kids become addicted, typically the first thing they do is feel guilty about it. Mm-hmm. But I don't think I was fully aware until you talked about it, how guilty the addict feels with continuing the addiction, and with knowing that they have a good family and they have parents who love them. Do you know what I'm saying? It's almost like if you both could get together and talk about your guilt. But I know that's an easy way of saying it. But anyway, yeah. You're absolutely right. And what we've said again on the podcast is, when someone is an addict, they're not a bad person. They've made some bad choices. We all make bad choices in our life. Mm-hmm. But you're a good person. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you realized that, because you are.
Thank you. I'm very glad I realized it too. And I found that for me, and that's the core of when I share my story and I talk about recovery. Recovery means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For some, it just means getting off drugs. For some, it means recovering from abuse, or trauma, or, there's a lot of different ways that the idea of recovery is applied. But the commonality I see to all of it, and a lot of other things in life, is that looking at myself like I'm a bad person, or I don't deserve it, or I'm not worthy. It's just, that's the basis of so much dysfunction, and self-forgiveness and acceptance is so crucial to healing and finding healing. And for me, it's mind-boggling, where my life has gone since then, and how that gave me a foundation to build something that I still look back and I can't believe. I mean, I'm telling my story, but I can't believe that was me. And I do, but
I can't believe it either.
strange.
I mean, I look at you and I can't believe it. I'm going to ask you when we're all done with this if you'll send me a before picture, if you have a before picture, because I can't believe it. I mean, I know it's true. I don't disbelieve what you're saying, but when I look at you, it's hard to imagine, what you were like back then, because and something that everybody listening has to grasp, their importance, their greatness, their deserving of what's good.
Yes.
Anyway.
Totally.
So what happened after that?
Well, I was living at the homeless shelter, and I got involved. I had a sponsor, a mentor that I was working with, who had he was in recovery as well. And during that time of my life, I was very excited just to be alive. And I was going to a lot of meetings, recovery meetings, and I was taking the bus there and taking the bus to meet with my sponsor once a week to do work. I would have writing assignments and we would talk about it. And, I had friends that kind of got me, and I got them, and I felt a newness in my life, and like great things were.
I get it.
Yeah,
I totally get it. I can only imagine.
Yeah. I had only known, one life, and now I was getting a taste of, how things could be, and so anyway, I started doing work with my sponsor and getting to the, just because I had that insight, it was enough to give me some space, but I still had a lot of work to do. I still had a lot of, I was triggered often, by something would happen and I would take it personal, and, I didn't have a lot of tools, and so I learned some tools to cope and to deal with things, and gradually, I got some relief, in all these negative feelings and beliefs that I had about myself, through talking about it with another person, and being transparent and being honest and being willing to look at those things. And I was able to apply the principles that I learned in all my relationships, at work, and I was, at first I was on SSI as well, because I had been declared to be insane by the courts pretty much. And so.
What's an SSI?
Social security, supplemental social income, or I forget the exact, it's disability,
Okay.
And so I was on that, and I didn't want to be on it. And I at the homeless shelter at HEP and my sponsor, they said, well, I wanted to get out and work right away. And they said, I think for you, it might be good just to take a year, and focus on recovery and doing this work, and you'll pay society back 100 times over, if you do that. And so I did. And when I got out of the homeless shelter, I didn't know where I was going to go. They had recommended some programs for me to go into, and I'd been to so many programs. I was like, man, I really felt like this is it this time. I don't need to go to a program. And I got talking to somebody, and there was someone in Pinellas County that had a llama farm, and they needed someone to feed the llamas and take care of them in exchange for room and board. And I went there, and I found myself on a llama farm, and with plenty of time to write and to kind of be in nature and play my guitar and it was a really great time for me. And so I kind of got my stuff together a little bit, and then after some months, I rented a room in Clearwater, and so things went from there. I went back to school for software development. I met my who would become my wife, and and life really got. It was just so exciting for me to be living finally. I found an entry-level job doing software development in Clearwater for a startup company, and I was myself, and there was one other developer there, and they hired me. And the funny thing is I had worked for a telemarketing company prior to that, and I wound up quitting because they spoke to us very poorly. They just, you'd never be able to find another job, and this and that, and you're lucky to be here, and get your ass to work. And they really talked down to us, and I quit on the spot. And I had just gotten married, and my wife was pregnant, and with our first son Levi. And the last thing I wanted to do was quit a job. In that situation, I would find another one first, and I didn't have my degree for software development yet, so I didn't know, what am I going to do? But I felt like that he had crossed the line, and I couldn't work in that situation because I owed it to myself not to be around that. And so anyway, I found this other job, and they hired me. I got an entry-level programming job without the degree, despite my past, and the company wound up blowing up, and we went international, and we hired new developers, and I worked with them and got to know them and helped them, and I wound up, I wound up becoming the director of software development for an international financial services company that makes software that integrates with banks. So it was a kind of full circle. And
when I read that, I was like, wait a second, He was a bank robber. Now he's working on software for banks. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but and I'm not like I'm not a business guy. Or I'm not a corporate guy either in a lot of ways. And, I just focused on applying the principles I had learned and being honest and helping people. And I found that my team liked me, and they respected me, and, I just tried to lead and help people, and more than, having a position or authority or, a bunch of technical expertise, because guys that we hired knew way more than me. And so things worked out, and I became a homeowner, and my son Levi was born, and then Finley. And, I was just, very amazed. To me, it's like miraculous, the life that I wound up with. And all of it went back to, that day that I realized that I was good enough and that I was okay. And that was my point of no return.
Yep. It's huge. And it's the type of message that we're trying to put out, or not trying to put out, we're putting out and hoping to reach people who are addicted or who know somebody who's addicted. And, you're important. You are important. And it's so easy to get into a mindset where you don't think you are, and you don't think you deserve a good life, and you don't think you deserve a good wife and a good job and 2 sons. It's just not true. You deserve it all. Mm. And I'm glad that you, Don, had that realization, because look at where you're at now. You have a wife and a home and 2 wonderful sons. And not only that, I want to know about your book, and I want to know about the courses that I saw online.
Sure. Well, first, I before all of that, I came to a place where I began to kind of get a little fearful, because I was kind of like living a double life. I was the guy that lived down the street, and I have a house, and I have 2 cars, and my wife's a yoga teacher, and I was afraid that my wife's friends would find out about me, and I was afraid that my neighbors would find out, and my coworkers, and I gotten close to some of them, and a few of them knew, but the whole company I don't think knew. And I I was invited to speak by my company and tell my story at some of the high schools here in Florida. And I did. And I realized that I had to tell my story, that it would help people. And I'd already wanted to do that. And I was just not sure of how I wanted to go about it. And so this opportunity presented itself, and I did. And so I kind of struggled with some things for a while about, well, what is my message, and what do I, how do I kind of keep it on the down low and do that and still have all of this. So anyway, I decided to take a risk and to take a leap of faith and just kind of come out, so I did. I posted on social media that I was coming out of the closet, and that would be a good attention grabber, I figured, and it was. And I told my story, and I was amazed at that I had been a bank robber, that I had been insane, and I had done all that time in prison, and I had a moment of awakening, and things have been different, and I did that, and I was amazed at the feedback that I got. People were. Someone at work stopped me in the hallway and said, "Man, I'm honored to know someone like you. That's amazing," and it wasn't a bunch of rejection, and I didn't get fired, and I didn't, things were good, and so I began speaking at the schools, and I began writing my book, and I went through a few rounds of that. It's telling my story. It's a memoir, and I found out that I could write, and I got an editor, and they coached me a little bit, and sent me back to the drawing board a few times, and I worked on it early in the morning when I had a minute, and late at night here and there, and so anyway, I published a book. It'll be out November 20th, and it's called "The Prison Within: A Memoir of Breaking Free." And it tells my story, and it's gritty, and it's real, and it talks about the inward journey just in the same kind of way that I've been talking about it here. There's some stories in there that are hardcore, but at the heart of it, it's talking about the journey, the inward journey, and I believe that it will help somebody.
Absolutely, I have certainty it will. And you said it's coming out November 20th.
Yes, November 20th. I'm kind of ramping up for the launch now, and so I'm very excited about it. And I created an online version of the presentation I was doing in the high schools called "The Hero Within," and that's at theherowithin.org. And it's links to a free course that anyone can sign up for and go through, and it just talks about the hero's journey, basically, and uses Hollywood and movies as an illustration of this, how we vicariously, secretly desire to be a hero, to overcome odds, and to win the day, and how we all have greatness within us, and we are meant to be a hero, and we want to be, and that's really what we have a right to be, that, and to be there for other people, and to be strong, and so it talks about those things, and so I have some talks about that in this course, and it's kind of aimed at high school students, but it really could, probably anybody could get something out of it. So
sounds like it. Okay, so the book is "The Prison Within," and I made note of the date, but you have our email. If you could just remind us when it's coming out, so that we can.
Sure.
Include it in our weekly email. The podcasts are done so far in advance. I might not be able to mention on the podcast, but I can definitely put it in our email.
Okay.
And then "The Hero Within" is the free course that's available.
Yes.
Don, if you had just one message that you could give our listeners, figure that some are probably addicted currently, some may be former addicts, some know someone who's addicted and aren't exactly sure how to handle it, but just if you had a message, what would it be?
My message would be that, especially for the person who's struggling and addicted, to keep getting back on your feet, to keep coming back to whatever it is that gives you hope and strength, and to not give up, And for those who are dealing with a loved one who is struggling. For me, hearing the message that I was worthy, my dad would tell me, you're a good person, Don. You just need to believe that yourself, and planting those seeds, that helped me, and really for me, love, just knowing that love was real, that it existed, was what ultimately gave me the hope in my darkest hour that I could get through it. And so it's not easy to love, sometimes it's hard to love, and
especially yourself.
Yeah, especially yourself, but and that's what it's all about, really, to keep loving that person and showing that, whether it's a tough thing or whatever form that takes, and for the person to somehow learn to love themselves. And it boils down to that, because a person who loves themselves will not abuse themselves, and that's what it boils down to.
That's awesome. Don, thank you so much for being willing to share your story. It's not an easy story, and I admire you for being willing to share it with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on, and it's a pleasure to be here.
What an emotional story. Emotional for me because I just can't even conceive of a 9-year-old or 10-year-old getting into drugs like he did. And it breaks my heart how young he was, but also emotional because of his realization that he is a really good person and deserves to have a good life. And look at what he's done with his life. If you're watching, if you're listening and you're addicted, you are important and you deserve to have a good life. And you need to realize that. And if you have a loved one who's addicted, you need to get them into treatment. You're not going to be able to give them that realization. But the sooner you get them into treatment so that they can come to their own realization, the better. We're heading towards the holidays. It is the worst time of year for people addicted. It is the worst time of year for friends and family of addicts because they think that they can just wait until after the holidays and that they'll make it through the holidays. It's not going to be good. I'll tell you that right now. So please get your loved one into treatment. If you're addicted, get into treatment. And if you can just help with this whole pandemic, think of a way to help. We all need to get on board. We all need to help end the drug addiction pandemic. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back again next week.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return, sponsored by Narconon Ojai. For more information on Narconon Ojai, call 866-231-5924 or visit www.narcononojai.org. Narconon is a non-12-step rehabilitation program based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard.